Hey everyone, Jeremiah here. We're going to get started in a minute, and we're just going to wait another minute or two and see if we've got other people joining us. So sit tight, and we'll be with you for this webinar in just a second. All right, everyone, we're going to make a start now, and welcome to our webinar from People Squad. I'm Jeremiah, and this is Sam. Hey, just a reminder before we start that this is for general education purposes only. So we don't know your situation, we don't know your career goals, and every hiring organisation is different. So just keep that in mind, and make sure you do your own research and get some professional guidance before you make any big life decisions. These are the type of headlines that we're seeing at the minute in the job market. And, you know, these are pretty kind of scary headlines, and they speak to a particular moment that we're dealing with, which is particularly about artificial intelligence. But yeah, things are getting tough out there, and a lot of organisations are stopping before they hire to ask themselves, could AI do this job? Do we really need to replace it? Do we need a new applicant, a new person on the ground, or can we actually just make do without that? And so I reckon there's a couple of different reactions we can have to this kind of labour market. We're coming to you from Australia, from Melbourne, where it's absolutely freezing tonight. And so here are three Australian animals, three different reactions that we can have to this type of scenario. We can have the kind of echidna, curl up in a ball, hope it's all going to go away, hope that we don't have to deal with it type reaction. We can have the Tassie devil, get frustrated and aggressive and lash out kind of reaction. Or we can have the magpie reaction, super adaptive, super connected to the local environment, very aware of relationships between things in the local environment. And so we want to partly cover off that mindset and that attitude tonight, and encourage you not to have the echidna reaction, not to have the Tassie devil reaction, but to have the really inquisitive and adaptive magpie reaction. All right, this is who we are. So my name's Jeremiah Byrnes. My career has spanned over 15 years, and it's gone across banking, higher education, and not-for-profit. I've done formal education in human resource management as well as in leadership. So I've spent a lot of time with students and with graduates in medium and big organisations, helping them understand what employers are looking for and get ready for the job market. And this is Sam. Sam, why don't you just give us a bit of a brief intro and tell us about yourself?
Yeah, Sam, my name, and I've been working in software engineering for probably at least 20 years, I'd say, and especially in the last 7-ish years, probably a little bit more. I've worked more as a hiring manager. I've done some people management and have run hundreds of interviews, and within that, I've hired lots of people. And I feel like I see, repeated mistakes that people make, and I'm keen to help people do better.
Excellent. All right. And so our company, our organisation is called People Squad. We're committed to helping people achieve career success through job application excellence, but even more than that, get a broader understanding of the key moments in career development that matter so that they can achieve success. And we've got a website which you can visit, peoplesquad.com.au. We've got a course available there. We've got a coupon which we'll provide to you at the end of this webinar, which will provide a discount to our job interview excellence course. And so if you're going for jobs at the moment, if you're about to go for jobs, if you're in the middle of that process, would encourage you to check out the website and check out the course. Now, tonight we're going to go through 6 different things, and hopefully at the end of this webinar, you're going to be able to really think through what it means to be looking for and getting a job in Australia. So what are some ways to find what jobs are in demand in Australia? Describe the goal of employers in Australia. Identify ways to develop the skills and the experience sought by Australian employers. Describe ways of building a successful professional network. Describe some typical steps in the recruitment process and identify some important considerations for early career planning. Along the way, I'm going to be asking Sam for his insights as someone who's doing a lot of hiring all the time to get a feel for practically what this stuff means. It's not just going to be theory. We're going to touch on the practical throughout. A reminder that we don't know your circumstances, so get that personal advice if you need it. All right, those are the 6 points, and they relate to our framework, our A+ People Squad A+ framework, where what we're really talking about when we think about getting a job in Australia, and this is not just true for Australia, it's just that we know Australia best, right? So it may be true in the country that you're tuning in from or the place that you're tuning in from, but we can say that based on our experience, it's definitely true of the Australian environment. So we're going to guide you through these 6 things: awareness, ability, action, alliances, application, and adaptability. And we're going to move pretty quickly through each of these topics, hit you with a bunch of information. It's a pretty high-level overview tonight. Make sure you put your questions in the comments if you've got any questions, and we'll see if we've got time to explore those at the end. But we're going to dive right in with the first one of these, which is awareness. So understanding yourself and also understanding the context. So what we'd want to say is if you're getting a job in Australia, it's really important that you're self-aware. What are your passions? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? But also, what are your circumstances? Maybe you have carer responsibilities that will impact the kinds of jobs that you should be going for or that would be appropriate for you, as an example. Being self-aware is going to help you figure out what kind of jobs might suit you. But not only that, employers and hiring managers actually expect that you will be self-aware. They're going to ask you in interviews about your passions and your strengths and your weaknesses. And so if you don't have that self-awareness, that is actually going to be a problem when it gets right down to applying for a job and doing an interview. It's important to know that there are formal tools that your high school, your university, or others might offer to be able to figure this stuff out. So the Moresby test is a common one that's used in high schools, for example. And there are plenty of other online tools you can use to kind of explore this type of thing. I've done StrengthsFinder before, which has been a good one. So make sure you explore what's out there, either individually or with your school or university. You also need to understand from an awareness perspective what jobs are available in Australia. Just because you want to do a job doesn't necessarily mean that that job is out there or is in demand. And you can actually go to, and we'd encourage you to Google, the Jobs and Skills Atlas. Australia collects formal government statistics on all the big types of jobs. There are hundreds of jobs listed there, and you can go and find out what are the skills required, how many people do that job in the state of New South Wales or Victoria or Tasmania at this point in time. But also there's a bit of future-looking information on that website where you can go and see what is the job prospects for this particular type of job into the future. High demand, medium demand, low demand, that sort of thing. You can also find out what kind of jobs are out there just by looking at the official listings, right? So LinkedIn will provide you with plenty of those. If you're not familiar, in Australia, seek.com will be probably the biggest public job board. They also run Grad Connection, where you can find grad positions, internships, that sort of thing. And your own university, if you're at university, might also have a job board that you can take a look at. And unofficially, you need to use your network to actually figure out what's going on out there, because that will often be a more immediate source of information about what's happening in your city or your state. More broadly, you can check out traditional media, you can check out social media to keep your finger on the pulse of what's in demand in Australia and what's under threat. Now, what's the employer looking for? So awareness is not just what am I like, it's not what jobs are out there. It's also what are hiring managers actually looking for? What is their kind of mindset as they come to this? So we're going to run you through this really quickly. They're looking for competency. So I really need someone with skill who can solve a problem for me. I've got a job that needs to get done, so I need someone who can do that. Connection, someone who's quite motivated and energetic about committing to that. Someone who's a good cultural fit. Someone who's easy to get along with in the team, easy to get along with as a manager. And maybe just to go back on that, not just easy to get along with, but maybe bringing cultural disruption, but it's the kind of cultural disruption that is sought. So more innovation or more change in a positive way, for example. It doesn't just have to be fitting in. It could also be bringing the kind of desired cultural change. They're also constantly busy, so flat out typically. So it's really important to be aware of that and not waste their time. And lastly, they're usually super cautious. So they are looking for the best option, the safest option, because hiring someone is super risky. Yeah. And so it's good to be aware of yourself, aware of what jobs are out there, but also aware, what is the hiring manager thinking? What are they looking for when they look to hire a new person? So Sam, we spoke before and you were saying, look, all of these things are important to you as a hiring manager. All of these things sort of really resonate with you. But what about connection? Like, why is connection such an important factor from your perspective as someone who's a hiring manager?
Yeah, I think connection is particularly important because if you put yourself into the shoes of a hiring manager that is very busy, if you have people that are very disconnected from the job, they will need a lot of attention, right? But yet when someone is very connected to the job, they're motivated, they will go on their own behalf. They do their job best because they want to exceed, they're invested, they're interested, and they need the least management, and also they're most likely to do the best job at what they're doing. So therefore, connection, I think, is actually a critical one as well.
Yeah, I reckon we've both encountered people who are super skilled, but they're not actually bringing that to the workplace because they're lacking that connection. And so making sure that you've got that and you can bring that to the job is something that the employer is going to be looking for. All right, so that's awareness. So remember the framework, we've got these 6 A's, it's the A+ framework, we've covered off awareness. Let's move on to ability. I reckon in Australia, and not just Australia, across the world, when people think of ability, what they actually think of is marks, academic grades, and they think in terms of, I've got to get really good marks. I need to have really, really deep expertise in my area. And we're not here to tell you that that's wrong. We don't want to encourage you to drop out of university, for example, or stop going to school. But we do want to highlight that it's much more, there's a bigger picture than just marks. Ability is not just about your grades. It's not just about your qualifications. I know Sam and I have talked a lot of times about people that we know or have hired who've got all the grades, but are actually really difficult to work with. And, we either don't hire them, or when we do, it turns out to be something quite difficult. So we want to think more generally about the T-shaped employee. And by that, we mean people who have not only got the specialist expertise, they've also got a set of transferable, more general, what is sometimes called employability skills. That's things like teamwork. It's things like problem solving. It's things like intercultural communication, right? These are not just about physics or about computer science. They're actually more people skills, more general skills, like I said before. Now, how would you build these? If you're at university, your university might offer breadth subjects which are outside of your discipline. People often complain about these or avoid these, but they're actually an amazing opportunity to broaden out away from your discipline. You can go and watch all sorts of YouTube channels that will provide you with skill and expertise in these types of things. There's all sorts of online learning from LinkedIn or Udemy, or even from the major tech companies themselves around these broader skills. And of course, you can go onto these platforms like Coursera or edX and find a lot of those. I reckon the richest way to do it is actually to have a mentor or a coach who's willing to spend time with you and actually help you develop that in a one-on-one manner, because then you're going to get really rich feedback about how to build them. And then the other thing to think about is how do you showcase that? Like if you're not in a job or you're trying to show to a prospective employer that you have these broader skills, like how are you going to show that off? Well, again, you can do that on your LinkedIn profile. So if you don't have one, make sure you get one set up. You could do that on your blog. You could do that on your Substack. You could do that on your own YouTube channel. So there's lots of channels where you could be showcasing your ability to solve problems or communicate well that kind of communicate out to an employer that you've got more than just that specialist expertise. Sam, we were talking before, and maybe you could comment on, like, for you as a hiring manager, as someone who's interviewed hundreds of people and recruited lots of people, like, what's the benefit? What's one of the benefits from your perspective of having someone who's got these general skills?
Yeah. I think that I often see we want to solve problems at work, right? That's at the core of a lot of what we do. And people that come in that have worked in different industries or even have just generally life experience and breadth of experience, they come in with much more unique solutions, right? Oftentimes other people will hone into one direction, but people that have that breadth come with very creative, very new and different solutions that really enhance the overall idea space and come up oftentimes with a much better solution.
Yeah. I reckon I'm using my arts degree. Yeah. Like every day I'm using my arts degree as much as I'm using my business training in the workplace. And it's about being able to connect some of those different things together to solve problems. All right. So what we've covered off so far is awareness. You're aware of yourself. You're aware of the jobs that are available in the Australian market. You're aware of what Australian employers are looking for. We've covered off ability. It's not just about grades. It's not just about qualifications. Now, Sam talked just then about experience a little bit. So we're going to move now into the third A, which is action, and talk about gaining experience. And this can be a really frustrating one if you are young, you're a student, you're a graduate, you're just getting going in your career. Because it's like, how do I get experience if you won't give me a job? But you won't give me a job because I don't have experience. Like, it's a real catch-22 there. Let's stop and think, why do Australian employers value experience so much? So remember their goals, right? They're trying to solve a problem. They're trying to get things done. They're super cautious, and they're also really busy. And what they are trained to do, and often what they look for, is they just look for past behaviour as an indicator of future behaviour. And there's like often formal recruitment training along those lines. Look for the past behaviour. That'll be a good indicator of the future behaviour. Whether you agree with that or not, that's often the training that hiring managers receive. And so that's why they're often so fixated on that. It helps de-risk everything for them. It helps them feel like it's a more safe hire that they're about to do. So how do you get that? How do you get that experience? Well, you can do it again in your formal course. If you're a student or you're at university, often you'll have the opportunity to do some work integrated learning or a placement, and we would really encourage you to do that. You might want to do a co-curricular program at university or in your community. Often they can be about things like entrepreneurship. You might want to study abroad or go abroad in a way that actually develops some sort of professional experience. You might want to volunteer. And that could be, again, within your community or within your university at student clubs. You might want to look at doing some freelancing work on a platform like Airtasker or Freelancer, because the barrier to entry can be quite low. And even if you're not making a lot of money, what you're building up is your portfolio and your actual experience there. And then we also would encourage you not to underappreciate or disregard just basic casual part-time work. Even stuff like working at McDonald's, which is seen often as low status work, is super valuable. Employers will often look at something like McDonald's experience and go, you know how to work under real pressure to a timeline, you know how to meet standards, you know how to work as part of a team to deliver a product over and over and over again. It's often seen as a really valuable piece of experience. So don't underestimate that, and don't disregard that. Sam, you're particularly in the software space. That's a kind of unique space, but maybe just talk to us from the software space. When you're talking to someone young who's looking to get experience, what's the kind of things that you encourage them to do in that space?
Yeah, I think software has some wonderful opportunities really for anyone to shine and show their experience, because you can develop software and do that for your own benefit. I've seen a lot of people straight out of uni, they had some interest in game development, right? So when someone comes to the job with and can show it to a game that they've developed, especially if they've published it, even if it's as a fairly independent sort of setting, hugely, important, right? I can see someone has gone through the trouble of building the whole game and seen it through all the way to the end, which is a massive achievement. The other thing there is there's lots of open source libraries that you can actually participate in, you can contribute. So there's a lot of opportunities there to build experience without a professional context.
Yeah, and I guess what part of what you're saying there is like you don't need to wait. You don't need to wait for that job. There's lots of ways in to make a start and get going now. And I reckon that's not just true of software. It's true in every field. There's often a low barrier to entry way to get in and start building that experience. And so the call out to you, if you're watching and you're young or you're a student, is like, what are the ways you could build up those useful experiences, even if you're just getting started, rather than waiting for those, rather than waiting for it to be offered up to you. All right, so we've covered awareness, we've covered ability, we've covered action, and so that was all about gaining experience. Now we're going to come to the fourth point, and we're right on time. We're about halfway through this webinar. So the fourth point is about alliances. So this is utilizing your network, building and utilizing your network. Let's have a think again about the hiring manager. They're often busy. They're often overwhelmed with applications. So for an entry-level position, it's not uncommon to get hundreds of applications for that entry-level position. And so a recommendation to a hiring manager, it often speeds up and de-risks the whole process, right? Because a bit of a tap on the shoulder, hey, this is someone you should check out. This is someone who I would recommend. And so that gives a bit of a hint to the hiring manager. This is someone I should be engaging with. Maybe this is going to help me make a good choice without having to expend heaps of effort and take too much risk. A couple of tips on the network would be to say, build it before you need it. Don't wait till the day before you apply for a job or the day before you graduate and go, now I'm going to start calling people up and trying to build my network. Start now. Start before you need it. As you do that, be genuinely interested in other people, right? Like people can smell a fake a mile away. They can sense when they're being used. Try and be genuinely interested in other people. Have a purpose. So what is the point of reaching out to someone? What is the point of having a meeting with someone? Make sure you're clear on what your purpose is and what your elevator pitch is about yourself. And then similar to the kind of being genuinely interested, have a think about what are you going to be giving in this situation, not just taking. So maybe this person has more experience overall as a professional, but maybe you know something about new technology or social media or some latest research that you've come across through your university studies that they might not know about. And so it's not just a one-way thing. There can be some reverse mentoring or reverse sharing that can be happening there as well. Ways you could do this, you could be engaging with your family, you could be engaging with your friends, you could be working to network just with your classmates. They will also have families and friends. You could have your own work colleagues, again, even through something like McDonald's student clubs at your university. Certainly in Melbourne, where we're sitting right now, some of the biggest universities in the world, some of the most professional, well-organised student clubs that we've encountered. So lots that can be achieved there. Professional associations, many jobs will have a kind of association that goes with them, so you can join those, and they'll often have a junior membership or student membership option. And then, of course, there's always LinkedIn. I would actually say everything on the list is more powerful than LinkedIn because LinkedIn, it's so easy to reach out to someone. And it's easy to ignore just a random like, hey, you've never met me before, but will you meet up with me? You've never met me before, but, will you give me advice? Like, it's possible. People might do that. but there's a lot of spam on LinkedIn, and it's very easy to disregard. So if you can use these other 5 sources or complement your LinkedIn networking with these other sources, we would definitely encourage that. Now, Sam, in your experience, you're not early on, you're kind of further on in your career, mid-career. What would you say you've discovered the benefit of having a network is?
It's interesting. When I think about the last few hires that I've done, and when I look at the colleagues that I work with right now, a lot of them have come through recommendations. And when I see a recommendation coming through, people always shoot to the top of the list straight away. Because if I've worked with someone, I've got that experience, I know that there's someone I want to work with that has a huge weight, right? Absolutely super important. So I make sure that as you go your professional life, build those connections, show how valuable you are, and it'll pay off big time later on in life. And also personally, I remember working at a startup turned scale up, funding runs out, things change, lots of people get made redundant, including myself. I lost my job. But because I have a network, within a week, I could tap so many people on the shoulder. They know they liked working with me, and it was so easy for me to find something new. So it gives you a lot of security as well as you go through your professional career.
Yeah, and you could tap that network at that time because you already had it.
You build up that relationship, and you can utilize it when it's needed.
Yeah. Perfect. That's really helpful. All right, so we've covered off awareness, we've covered off ability, we've covered off action, and then we just covered off alliances, so building up that network and not waiting till the last minute to do it. Okay, let's move on to applications. So like you've understood about yourself, the job market, you've understood what the hiring manager is looking for, you've worked on your ability, you've worked on gaining that experience, you've built that network, and so all the way along, you might be applying for jobs. It's not like you have to wait till now to apply for jobs. But we want to think also about what happens in this particular process. Every industry will differ. Every organisation will differ. And not only that, every hiring manager will differ. They'll have preferences that are, quite varied. So what we're going to show you is just a range of things that could happen and the normal steps that might happen, but there's a lot of variety, and we'll cover off on that as well. So, for example, typically you'd start off with some kind of written application. So that would be submitted via an online portal, like a generic online portal like Exec.com, or it could be a company-specific portal as well, especially for a big organisation. Sometimes that application is read by a human who's sitting there reading everything coming through the mailbox, but often it's read, especially in a big organisation, by an applicant tracking system, which is just doing an automated scan, looking for keywords, looking to see that you've ticked the essential criteria, like you can work the required hours, you've got the required working permits, all that sort of thing. Normally it would include a cover letter of 1 page or less. It's a bit controversial. Some people say don't do a cover letter. Some people say you must do it. Some people say it's a massive advantage. Some people say it's really annoying. But it's still a pretty common thing to include a brief note as part of your written application, and it can be a differentiator. And then the core of the written application would normally be a resume, no more than 2 pages. Some people would say keep it to 1. And then in some industries, again, there'll be responses to particular questions. And that might be built into the portal itself, or you might need to submit a separate attachment that responds to certain questions that are asked. If you get through because they look at your written application and they're interested, next step would normally be some kind of interview. That might be done on Zoom or Teams, just a quick video interview. It might be done face-to-face. It can also nowadays be fully automated. So you might actually, especially for entry-level roles, you might go in, fill in the basics of the application on the online platform, and then soon after be offered the opportunity to do an interview with no human present on the other side of the interview. Yeah. And so what's happening there is you might record your responses. They give you a question, you record a response, you click next, they ask you another question, you click next. The questions appear as text, and then you record your video. We are seeing the beginning of companies offering an AI avatar who will actually ask you the questions and interact with you as part of the application process. Not very common, but I think we're going to see more of that sort of thing, because what big organizations are trying to do is churn through lots of applications really quickly and really efficiently. So the automated interview systems, and potentially the ones that integrate AI, are becoming more and more popular. Now, those are the two big things that would normally happen. And when it comes to interviews, there's also lots of different formats, right? So you might be interviewed just as an individual. Some organizations will do group interviews, but there's also other things, like sometimes they'll call you and do some phone screening and ask some basic questions after they've received your written application. They might do some competency or personality or psychometric testing. They might ask you to complete a practical activity like a short article or some coding. Sometimes they'll use a platform like Codility to test you out, for example, in the software space. They might ask you to respond to a case study. They might ask you to come to a physical location where they do all of this in the same place at the same time over 90 minutes, 2 hours, half a day, and they want to see you interacting with people and completing all of these assessments all in one go. If you've moved through written application interviews and covered off any other activities, they might also do some reference and probity checks, right? Calling up past employers, calling up your professional references and finding out about you, and also just doing basic checks to make sure you haven't got a criminal record or any other issues that might be a problem when it comes to hiring you. Okay, now we need to move to the next slide. Here we go. So our tips for you: get help. Definitely get help. Like, there's a lot on this past slide, right? There's a lot of steps. There's a lot of things that could happen. So get some help. Ask others to review your application, people who've got more experience, or even colleagues or friends who've got good insight on how to communicate. You might even want to set up and participate in a mock or a pretend interview, or talk to an AI tool. Actually participate in an interview using an AI tool that can give you some feedback about how you're going with your interview. You could also, this is a little bit risky, but you could give it a go, especially if it's a smaller or a medium-sized organization. And if you had a network, this could also be particularly helpful. You might want to think about reaching out to the hiring manager before you do your application, calling them up, explaining who you are, telling them that you've noticed the job, asking a few insightful questions, because then they know your name, they know that you're super insightful, and then when your application comes through, it's like, that's Sam who I spoke to on the phone. I definitely want to pay a little bit more attention to this application. This can be risky. This can backfire. If it says in the application, do not contact us, do not contact them. You will probably get crossed off the list. It will not work in your favor. But if it's an option, you might want to think about it. You might want to see if that's a way that you could differentiate yourself. There's lots of questions that you might face in an interview, like you might face personal kind of motivation questions, you might face technical questions, but a big one that you'll face in Australia and in lots of countries, not just Australia, is behavioural questions. Here's an example. Tell me about a time when you had to deal with conflict in the workplace. What did you do? So the big thing here is they're not really interested in your theories. They're not really interested in your opinions. They want to know about your past behaviour. Yeah, so they want to understand, what have you done in the past? Tell us about a workplace example. Tell us about an example from your life, if you don't have one from the professional world, that can help us understand what you're like as a person and how you approach things. And a very common framework or recommendation for this is to use the STAR technique. And the STAR technique is something that we explore in a lot more detail in our Job Interview Excellence course, which you can check out at peoplesquad.com.au. But here's the STAR technique, trying to answer by saying, here's the situation that I was in, so painting a picture of the context. Here's the task, here's the problem or challenge that I took responsibility for. Here's the action, so these are the different steps that I went through. And this is the result. This is what happened at the end of it. And there's a few little pointers there about where you might want to spend the most time, particularly around action. These are the things that I did in that situation. But each of these are important, and often hiring managers have been trained to specifically look out for responses that cover off each of these star elements. Sometimes they will literally tick off, have you noted the situation, task, action, and responsibility? So make their job easy for them. And sometimes they'll even prompt you like, hey, what was the result of that? Or tell us more about the actions that you took. So be sensitive to the prompts that they might try and help you with as well. As I mentioned, you can go and do our course all about this. That's the URL. We've got videos on there. We've got skits on there. We've got some links out to some AI coaching on ChatGPT. And you can use the QR code to get to the course, or just go to peoplesquad.com.au to find it there. Remember, we've got a coupon code that will provide you at the end of the webinar that will be valid for a little while after we've done the webinar. It also includes some printout guides, and we're building up the course over time and improving it. Okay, we've covered off awareness, ability, action, alliances, and we've just covered off application. Yeah, so like, what do you actually have to do to apply for a job? The written aspect of it, the interview aspect of it, the other kinds of things that you might be required to do as part of a job application. So we're at the end. We're almost there, and we're going to finish by talking about adaptability, exploring options. I reckon this is a really powerful point. I wish I understood this better. I wish I understood this in more depth earlier in my life. And one way to think about it is like a skill tree in a video game. So if you're a gamer out there, you'll know that in an RPG, a role-playing game, as you go, you're building up experience, and you get to assign those experience points to different skills in the game. And as you do that, as you choose skills, as you choose opportunities on the tree, some of them open up more opportunities, and some of them provide fewer opportunities but allow you to go further and further in specializing, and becoming more of an expert in a particular area. So let's think about this skill tree and the idea of like pathways and opening up pathways or closing down pathways when it comes to getting a job in Australia, when it comes to actually just building a career, right? So this is a more general career development point. So if we think of that skill tree earlier on in your life, usually, not always, but usually you've got fewer life commitments, You've got more general skills and expertise. There's everything that you're doing has got a lower barrier to entry. There's lower reward, right? You're not paid as much. There's less rewards of other kinds. There's more competition, but there's also more roles available. Later on in your career, typically in the mid stage, the later stage, everything's kind of moved on from that, right? A lot more life commitments. You might have the mortgage, you might have kids, you might have other commitments. Everything's more specialized when it comes to your job. There's a much higher barrier to entry. That means there's higher reward, but there's actually fewer roles out there, right? Kind of less competition in some ways, but fewer roles. So it's pretty intense competition the higher that you go up. And so early on in your career, I reckon it's worth reflecting on this reality. What we see a lot of, what we hear a lot of, what we know a lot of schools and universities and families do is kind of say, figure out when you're 12 years old what you want to do for the rest of your life, and make sure you choose every course from when you're in year 7 till the end of university that ensures you become a surgeon, and make that decision when you're 12, right? Maybe you know when you're 12 that's exactly what you want to do, but it's worth thinking about having a broader view on that. Early on, you might want to think about the pros and cons of a highly specialized full-time education pathway. Like if you lock into physiotherapy, that's going to lead to physiotherapy. If you realize, I hate physiotherapy, right? It's going to be difficult to find like another pathway. It's going to be a bit costly to kind of find another option. Not impossible, just going to have some costs associated with it. Similarly, what's the pros and cons of an early specialization in a role or in an industry? It's worth thinking about the benefits of experimenting with all of that, the role, the industry, the employment status, the location. These things are harder to do later in your life. So you might want to have some fun. You might want to explore some things and figure out, I really don't like being a physio. I'm a great florist. Yeah, that's an easier experiment to do when you're younger. It's a harder thing to do when you're later on. As you do that, if you're exploring around and jumping around, one of the risks is that there's no connection between the things you're doing. You're just a person who's done a bunch of random stuff. You're not a great, at that point, you're potentially not that attractive in the labour market. Here's a person who's done a bunch of random things. It is worth thinking about how do you maintain a theme or maintain a story that connects all of those different experiences and choices. So it could be people or learning or creativity or technology. There could be some kind of theme that connects these things. And it's always good as well to make a start. Like we've said all the way through this webinar, make a start. Don't wait around for everything to be offered up to you. You're probably not going to become the CEO on day one. Go for it. If you think you can, go for it. We know from Mark Zuckerberg and others, this stuff does happen, but it's often good just to make a start, get going, and start exploring. All right. That is the People Squad A+ framework. When you're getting a job in Australia, what we would encourage you to do, and again, it's not necessarily specific to Australia, but we know the Australian context better than any other because that's where we're speaking to you from. Really important that you've got self-awareness. You're aware of the jobs that are actually present in Australia. Check out that Jobs and Skills Atlas that we talked about. And you're aware of the hiring manager and what they're looking for. It's also important that you're not just focused on academic grades, qualification after qualification. What actual practical skills have you got? It's also important that you invest in experience, building up a portfolio of experiences that you can demonstrate to people, paid or unpaid. It's really important that you utilize and you build up those alliances, that network. Sam talked about how important that is, and doing it early so you can draw on that later in life. Imagine finishing university with a network of 20 or 30 people that you can call on, as opposed to graduating and going, I don't know anybody who could possibly help me find a job. There's a very big difference at that point. Knowing the steps in the application and what they could be and how to approach those. That's why you need to check out our course. And being adaptable, right? Thinking through the pros and cons of different ways of being flexible as you approach this and adaptable as you approach this, particularly if you think back to what we started with in a context where AI is disrupting everything and injecting a lot of fear into the labour market. There's a higher need at the moment for that adaptability than there probably ever has been before. And again, to call back to that idea from the start, really having that mindset that's not about curling up into a little ball and hoping it'll all go away. It's not about getting frustrated and aggressive like the Tassie Devil, but it's about actually being super adaptive, super aware of the environment, utilising the resources around you, just like a magpie. So there's the Australian connection for you. All right, so we're going to wrap up. Thanks so much for tuning in. As we wrap up, don't forget we've got our job interview excellence course available at peoplesquad.com.au. You can use this coupon code FRIEND30 to get a 30% discount off that. That'll be live for the next few weeks. So feel free to visit the site, check out the course. We've explained some of the different features of the course throughout this webinar. And we really appreciate you tuning in. Keep in mind that the whole presentation has been for general education purposes only. So, please don't go and make big life decisions tonight based on something that you've heard without maybe thinking about getting some professional advice and thinking about the particular context that you're in. But really appreciate you tuning in, and hopefully you've gained something useful from this webinar about getting a job in Australia. And we look forward to running another one again soon, and we'll speak to you then.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.